is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. A carryover of what happened yesterday in Parliament. All the papers have projected their headlines in effect to the speech by the President yesterday. With me in the studio on my far right is Danson Mukile, who is Diaspora Affairs Strategist based in the United States of America. Good morning.
Good morning, Ayub.
Lovely having you here on the broadcast. Nora Bosibori is policy analyst. Good morning, Nora.
Morning, Ayub.
Also lovely having you on the broadcast. We are also joined by Manasseh Tunen, who is an advocate of the High Court. Good morning.
Good morning, Ayub.
Much appreciated. Also with us this morning is Mgeni Mboto, the head of communications and research at the United Democratic Alliance Party. Good morning.
Good morning, Ayub.
Much appreciated. Advice Mundalo is communications director at the Jubilee Party, as well as an active youth leader at the Jubilee Party. Good morning, Advice.
Good morning, Ayub.
Angel Mbudi is the chairperson of the Jubilee Youth League, and I thank you for your time as well, Angel. Good morning.
Thank you, Ayub. Good morning.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday was historic in many aspects, but first, beginning with you, Nora. It was a bad deal. It was not a better deal. And certainly, was it shocking to hear the directives given by the President that this was not in the best interest of the country?
Ayub, good morning once more. I think that the Adani deal was not a good deal at all. From the start, Kenyans have been protesting. We've been in the streets. You remember when the Gen Zs went to JKIA to, compel the government to cancel that deal at that point. But of course, they were hell-bent on continuing with the Adani deals. So of course, we know that by now, the only reason that the president came out and cancelled the two Adani deals is because of the direct indictment of Adani himself by the US prosecutors. But of course, we know that this pressure did not emanate from the locals, ourselves as Kenyans, but rather he's just trying to maintain credibility with international partners. So then this begs the pertinent question: who does the government listen to? Do they listen to the people who put them in power, the citizens of this nation, or do they have to wait for influence from international partners? Because we know for sure that this is a direct call from the US government, especially because we depend highly on IMF and World Bank and other multilateral and bilateral agreements to push through, our budget deficits and a lot of grants and funding to the government. And therefore, the cost-benefit analysis from the indictment shows that we had no any other choice than to cancel these deals. But otherwise, just the status quo remaining, then without any indictment, for sure these deals would have continued to fruition. And Ayub, let me remind you once more that these deals were extremely punitive to the fact that, for example, let me just give examples so that Kenyans know what we are grappling with and what our leaders are doing to our country. For example, the 3 transmission lines that the Adani group were coming to, kind of commission in Kenya were about 372 kilometers, and they were costing us $737 million US, while we actually completed a 612 kilometer transmission line, the HDVC. All right, the Ethiopia line, which actually was only costing us $140 million US, which shows that the Adani deal with lesser kilometers of transmission lines was charging us 7 times more. And another case in perspective so that Kenyans understand how the leaders are taking us for a ride is look at the wheeling charges of Ketraco. For example, Ketraco runs the transmission lines of 5,476 kilometers across the country, and they only earned 3 billion from Kenya Power as wheeling charges. Yet, Adani was going to be paid 21 billion every year for these 372 kilometers of their transmission lines. And of course, collectively, in total for the next 30 years, we were going to pay 636 billion to Adani. Then Kenyans have to raise to the occasion and ask crucial questions to this regime, that they have failed us and that these deals across board are punitive and we do not need them.
All right. Advice, what certainly came out yesterday was the projection of a listening president, but does it also reveal that the government overlooked or was putting Kenyans into an agreement that would increase electricity tariffs, as well as failing to do due diligence on this matter?
Thank you very much, Ayub, and it's been a long minute. And in the same effect, I would want to start by putting some clarification, Ayub, that first, I serve on the National Executive Committee of the Jubilee Party as the National Youth Chair. There has been a lot of attempts by the Citizen TV studios to change the leadership of the Youth League of the Jubilee Party. And I want to get that clarified, that I serve as the National Youth Chair of the Jubilee Party. And that is by deed of Gazette notice of March 2022. And I've actually shared it with you so that we don't misinform the public. Because every time I've kept receiving phone calls by people asking me who is exactly the youth chair of the Jubilee Party. That is a matter in public domain. And I think by the fact that now you have the Gazette notice, and I know Citizen TV can actually clarify matters. They can be able to call the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. And Citizen TV can be able to give us details of the Adani deal. I'm sure matters of Jubilee are not too hard. So you can be able to actually get it straight that I serve in that capacity, and let us not misinform the public anymore. Now, on matters that you've actually asked about the cost of electricity and actually whether the government is actually a listening government. You cannot be able to know whether government is listening if it cannot be able to do something and then retrieve it. So there has been a call on matters of the Adani deal, and it has come to a situation where even the lowest of the Kenyan, deep in the village, is able to understand the Adani deal. That just speaks to you how involved the people were on matters of this Adani deal. So for me yesterday, the president actually being able to cancel that was a step in the right direction, because that actually showed that the president is listening to the opinions of Kenyans, and also listening to what is happening within the world space, because we saw what happened in the US, and it was in the media. So to me, that was a step in the right direction, because Kenyans have continued saying that let government listen to them. Let this government listen to us. And of course, sometimes also understand that as a leader, you are in a position where you think this is the best way to take the country, but sometimes your imagination is not necessarily what is the direct effect of the ground. Okay. So I tend to think that there must have been, when I kept looking at what the changes that want to be done at the airport, the cost of electricity, it is true that we have a problem at the airport. It is not, it's not fiction. We have seen journalists actually go out at the airport and actually just be able to show us the leakages in the airport. So is it a fact that we needed some fixing of the airport? That is true. The government need to do something, it had to do something. And did it start to do something? Yes, it started to do something. But now, this thing that it started to do, despite the fact that it was addressing the challenge, but it was not necessarily in a manner that was going to take us in a proper direction. The cost implications were too high, and many other things. So for me, I saw in yesterday's address, I saw a listening president, and I was also impressed by the report on our food security. I think it's also a step in the right direction, and the state of the economy that we are. I was happy to hear that the president is aware that money is not in the pockets of Mwananchi. The president is actually aware.
Yeah, he appreciated the challenges and the hardships, especially on the cost of living.
Exactly.
And Advocate Tunen, given what has been happening, then does this cast aspersions and questions which are abound of how we do these public-private partnerships and whether we follow the due process as regards doing background checks and on profiles of the companies that we give these mandates to undertake these projects?
Thank you very much, Ayub. The Private Partnership Act provides that before a government or the entity that starts to enter into a contract, there has to be a due diligence. I think that is provided under Section 37, that you must do a due diligence to establish the background of the company that intends to invest in Kenya. And one of the reasons that you need to do, one of the things you need to check is whether they have been bankrupt before, whether they have been indicted in any corruption issue, and whether they are able to do that project, and also if they've been disbarred from doing any project in any other country and their country of origin. So I think one of the issues also that was raised is lack of transparency, because the Act also provides that in every step there has to be transparency. You have to notify or make public every issue in the contract. And what we saw is that most of the provisions of this contract were not in public domain until a whistleblower said, look, I have come across these documents and it relates to a Kenyan company, an investment in Kenya. What do you think about it? And it created an uproar. And my take is that, you know, sometimes you can do a background check, but you do not get anything. What you get are allegations, because sometimes allegations are not true, because you've seen people being taken to court and they are set free because those were just mere allegations. You have really to find something solid to hold on them to. And one of the key issues that came, and the president appreciated that we've received information, new credible information from partner states and also from Kenyans, because he said, I've listened to you when you raised issues on this. And these issues are credible because based on the information that the president received, and there are warrants, and I believe that was in the news, there are warrants which have been issued against some directors of Adani and even Adani himself. So that is a direct indictment and a serious issue that the president cannot ignore. So I believe that up to the time it was done, this was an issue that was done hurriedly. And maybe some things were not, either were overlooked or were not in the public, or when they did their due diligence, it was not discovered.
And government officials did this or have been presiding over this process, is it? What does it then tell us about the integrity and the capacity of our institutions in looking at the background or doing background checks of companies that you're getting into agreements with? Because it looks like this was a bad deal, an ugly deal ab initio.
Yeah, sometimes I do not want to cast aspersions on agencies. That could be the DCI, the KRA, and all that, because I believe they have enough capacity to handle such issues. But I don't know really what could have happened, or maybe the report that they submitted was misinformed. But I believe we have capacity in our independent institutions to conduct such inquisitions.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Angel, did it have to take us a whistleblower, then an indictment process in the US to inform a presidential decision to cancel contracts with a company that had rather been doing its affairs or carrying out its affairs across the world in secretive manner that was replete with corruption and bribery?
First of all, Ayub, now that we are talking about matters of integrity, I'd like to respond to my colleague here, Advice Mundalo, who claims to be the chairperson of the Youth League, is that I'd like to point out that his faction of the so-called Jubilee wing does not recognize the former President Uhuru Kenyatta as the party leader, and they do not recognize my Secretary General, Jeremiah Kioni, as the bona fide Secretary General. And his faction also has people who hold state offices, and they also want to be members of a political party, which is not allowed in our constitution. So I think it's a matter of time where now we as young people now focused on real things and be able to see what the kind of political machinations that are coming from this William Ruto government, where stifling political parties has become an issue. I was elected by members of the Jubilee Party on March in 2023 as the chairperson of the Jubilee Youth League and as a member of the National Executive Committee, where Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta is the party leader and the Secretary General is Jeremiah Kioni.
Parties have gazette notices, Ayub.
And there was a court order to that effect.
The leadership of political
parties I don't want us to... Okay,
is by gazette notice.
Let's not reduce this to a Jubilee Party matter, ladies and gentlemen.
TV,
okay, can I just...
a gazette notice to the leadership of Jubilee Party. Political parties are public institutions.
Okay, can I just take charge of my show, ladies and gentlemen?
Public institutions. We are here at youth leadership.
Please take charge.
Advice, can I just...
let us all prove.
I've given you the time.
I've given you a gazette notice.
Thank you.
To that effect.
We are discussing another tough subject matter altogether.
Yes.
And this is a matter that was substantively also dealt with by the court. So proceed.
Yes, and we have a court ruling.
Thank
you. So we can
talk
about what the court said.
We will not discuss the court ruling for now because we have another important matter to discuss.
But let us not mislead the public.
Yes,
Angel Mbudia
is make your submissions.
Thank you,
not the chair of the Jubilee Party, and that is the fact.
It is wrong that
so let her prove the leadership of the Jubilee Party.
had to wait for
if that cannot be proven, then let
Can
us
you just
not
respond to my
mislead the
question?
public.
Advice, let's have some order.
But in the order, let us also
I gave you the time to respond to my question. We are discussing an important subject matter. We invited cordially, with respect, so that you respond to these issues in your capacity as a Kenyan, and let's not reduce
in my capacity, and in that capacity, we serve in public.
With respect, can we not reduce this show to political party affair?
We don't want to reduce it. We just want to be clear.
Kindly, then allow her to make her submissions.
And I have given you a gazette notice.
I gave you the time to respond to all what you wanted to say. Allow her to make her submissions.
And I have also given you a gazette notice which you can refer to.
Thank you, but allow her to make her choice as well.
But that means also the gazette notice.
I am the owner of the show. Advice, with respect, can she make her submission?
I do not refuse that you are the owner of the show, and this show is supposed to serve public interest.
Can we be orderly then, so that everyone makes his or her submission?
And in our being orderly, we must be factual.
Because of time. Please, with respect.
With respect, we also...
Yes, Advice, make your point.
Let's be factual.
Anju.
Thank you, Ayub. What I'd like to say about what came out of the United States government talking about Adani is something that we have been deliberating as Kenyans. There were protests in JKIA, and someone blew the whistle. And what scares me is there's so many things that this William Ruto's government is about to do or is doing, and we are not aware about. And when we see a country like the US now saying that this guy is a criminal, when already there were so many protests, even in India, his home country, that this guy is a dealer and he's a wheeler dealer, and we as Kenyans go ahead to give him direct access to our tenders, even without a competition, and we are able to say that we're going to entrust them with key national security assets like energy, things like even the health sector, and we are going to send someone who is just a corrupt dealer within the global space, not even just in India alone. So I think it's important that our Kenyan government be at least patriotic in the things that they're doing in their running of the administration. There's no patriotism at all within the Kenya Kwanza administration. It is just the usual chest-thumping, mpenda msipenda, we are going to do it within 2 weeks, we are going to impeach you. That's the conversation that we're having within our government. And we are overlooking the very crucial elements of the education sector, the health sector, and we're now going into the under-the-table deals, because we've seen exactly what they did with the US machinations. And they're showing us that they even had items called development fees. And that's where the corruption was going to come in. The same aspect we were talking about a few months ago about budgeted corruption. They had that budgeted corruption. And when I looked at our politicians defending and supporting the Adani deal, then I also asked myself, how much were they getting for them to do press conferences and even speak in parliament in support of that, not even blowing the whistle and making their stand and saying that if the due process was not followed, then this is a raw deal. Very few members of parliament and senators came out to speak against that. Then I saw them clapping and cheering at the president during the State of the Nation when he announced that there was going to be a cancellation. I mean, they were the same ones who were supporting it. What exactly were they trying to show Kenyans? I think we have very, very... I'm avoiding to say mediocre, but our parliaments are really, really letting us down.
Thank you. We'll talk about the role of parliament, given the crucial role that they do play. Mgeni, coming to you. How was the reception within the UDA quarters about the direction by the president yesterday, given the robust defense that was mounted by government officials in the build-up to the deal with Ketraco and the one in the pipeline before the cancellation yesterday for the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport?
I believe for the party, it was about addressing the one thing that I've been trying to tell the public, that we are a listening government. We understand the importance of transparency and accountability. So for me, the president's speech or the president's withdrawal of the contract was about telling Kenyans that, yes, sometimes the due diligence that we needed to have done, maybe it was not done to the right direction, but this is where we're moving at. We are moving at, the corruption element, the anti-corruption element, where is one of the biggest issue that the president is trying to deal with, the e-procurement. That is what we said, that we're moving everything to the e-procurement. We're digitizing so many things because we are telling Kenyans that we are dealing with that. And the due diligence that was supposed to be done, and maybe it was not done because, like I quote one of my colleague here saying that allegations, sometimes there were allegations. But after receiving very concrete information based on this, we were able to actually sit down as a leader and say what is best for the Kenyan citizen. And that, for me, is a win. Is a win because as leader, when you sit down and say, if we are not going in that direction, and Kenyans have actually voted and say, this is not the direction we are going, and you actually make a decisive decision and say, no, we are not going to that direction because it's not for the best interest of Kenyans.
Yeah.
That was a good direction to take for me. That was a huge win for the party.
And Mukile, how important is the Kenyan citizenry, who appears to be emboldened? Yesterday, the head of state appreciated that. How key is this to the growth of our democracy and the Kenyan society?
Thank you, Ayub. And I think it's my first time to be on Citizen TV.
And welcome.
And we really appreciate you really help us, even the diaspora. Thousands and millions of Kenyans across the diaspora watch Citizen TV. And they will wish that there will be more engagement with Citizen TV in the diaspora. So that is something, a feedback from the diaspora. Just back to your question, I think the whole Adani deal, and just to say this is not the only contract that has been happening in this country related to JKIA. There are multiple, even President Moi cancelled one in 2000. So I appreciate that it's a good step in strengthening our democracy, because we pass laws, including the PPP Act, but most of our laws are never tested to this extreme. And if you realize, just to remind you that the whistleblower of this whole Adani deal is a diasporian. He lives in France. I really appreciate. And you can imagine the impact of Kenyans who live in the diaspora, that they are watching every step the government is making, and they are also making sure they hold the government to the account to it. So we appreciate that democracy city is strengthening. Our institutions, our agencies need to watch out and realize that it's no longer the norm whereby you just go do deals here and there, you get money, you do corruption, so that something can go through. So Adani deal is a way of opening out for many leaders in this country, that whenever you are trying to suggest, especially when it comes to public assets, because public assets are very critical. When you try to do any investment venture in a public asset, you need actually to do due diligence. And most of the agencies in our country, for sure, they fail when it comes to due diligence, because there's some kickbacks that happen to these individuals. We try to bring a raw deal in the government. It happens. I've had a chance as well to push an investor to come in this country, and it's very hard. You know, someone wants to get something out of everything you do. It's for the country, but it always happens. So I'm hoping that this is a good step, but the president has to do more. Let these individuals who are involved in this Adani deal actually be prosecuted, because this is not just going to stop there. They did a wrong thing for the country, and for the K-Truck, I think there could be some compensation on the side. That's the taxpayers' money.
Yeah, okay. That's because of the commitment of the contract. Ladies and gentlemen, when we get back from the break, we have a solid 1 hour to run through the other issues the president yesterday outlined, as well as the appreciation he made for the struggles Kenyans go through regarding the high cost of living, as well as the steps his administration is taking to stabilize the economy, and also in furtherance of that, the gender-based violence he talked about, and the measures that his government has as well taken to stabilize the food security situation in the country. But there is also another pending matter of the farm, which is also involved in the provision of the technology for the Social Health Authority, which is the new scheme that the country transitioned to. We welcome your contributions. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak.